Welcome to Coach Taylor's Class Notes. Today we're going to be talking about literal equations. So real quick, let's just remind ourselves about terms, coefficients, and constants. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of my terms yellow. So remember, we divide terms by plus and minus signs. So mx is going to be my first term in the first problem, and then 3x is going to be my first term in the next problem. So we're going to do terms pink and yellow. Then plus b, because again, the pluses and the minuses divide my terms, and then plus 45y. So now we're going to put our coefficients in a blue box. So a coefficient is any number or letter in front of a variable. Remember, our variables are usually, in algebra, are usually x and y. Sometimes we have other letters, but for the most part, those are our variables. So if we're looking at this first equation, because I have x, my coefficient is going to be the letter in front of x. And if I'm looking at this next problem, they actually have numbers in front of my letters, so those are my coefficients. And then finally, we're going to put our constants in green. So remember, our constants are numbers that are by themselves and do not have a variable next to them. So we've said that in these cases, x and y are normally our variables. So in this case, plus b is going to be my constant because it does not have an x or a y. In our next problem, we don't have any constants. They're all variable terms. So let's talk about literal equations. Literal equations are equations with more than one variable that we cannot solve, but can rearrange. So literal equations can be complicated because we don't have numbers in most literal equations. So we can't actually get x equals 3 or y equals 21 or anything like that. All we can really do is move the pieces of the equation around to make them equal something specific. We're still going to distribute, we're still going to add or subtract terms, and we're still going to multiply and divide coefficients. So the rules haven't changed. It's just the way that they look has changed. So let's go through this first problem right here. So this first problem, we want to solve for x. So I'm going to put a big box around my x because I need my problem at the end to look like x equals. And so this is where we've really got to use our math skills and really got to think through things and think through our coefficients versus our constants. So if I'm looking at this problem here, my y equals 5x minus 6, my constant is negative 6. So I'm just going to do just like we have been doing in all of the rest of our problems. I'm going to flip my sign, I'm going to flip my sign, and I'm going to bring my variable term down. So my 6's cancel, I'm left with 5x on that side. Now this is where literal equations get complicated. Y and 6 are not terms that I can combine. They are not like terms. So what I have to do when I do not have like terms is I just have to add 6 to the end. So it's just going to be y plus 6. And that's all I can do because my 6 doesn't have a y, so I cannot combine them. And I'm going to put a blue box around my x again because I need my problem to be x equals. And so what I need to do now is I have a number next to a letter. A number next to a letter means multiply. And also it also means that that number is a coefficient. Anytime I have a coefficient, I know that I need to divide by my coefficient. So I'm going to divide by my coefficient on both sides. My 5's are going to go away. I'm going to bring down my variable. Now real quickly, let's look at this other side. I've got y plus 6 divided by 5. I know that there's an invisible 1 in front of my y, but I cannot divide 1 by 5. Nor can I divide 6 by 5. So we're just going to leave this problem simply as y plus 6 divided by 5 equals x. That is how I solve literal equations. All right, so this next problem we are solving for y. So again, I need my problem to be y equals. So I'm going to put a big box around my y. Now, I can't do anything with the 3 because I still have this 2x over here. I know that my 2 is positive, so just like we've been doing, I'm going to move my 2x to the other side. So the way that I do that is I need to subtract or flip the sign, and what I do to one side, I do to the other. My 2x's go away. I bring my variable term down, which is negative 3y, and equals. So here on this side, I have a constant and a variable term. Because that 8 does not have an x, there's really nothing that I can do. So I'm going to write down my x, or my 8, and then I'm going to write down my negative 2x. Because again, there's nothing that I can, they're two different terms, so I cannot combine them, so I just put them next to each other. I still need my y to be y equals. As long as that negative 3 there is there, I've got to do something to make sure that it's just y. So a number next to a letter tells me it's a coefficient. To get rid of coefficients, I divide by them. What I do to one side, I do to the other. So it becomes y equals. And so now I've got to look through. What can I do to these, just like when we were simplifying expressions. So 8 cannot be divided by negative 3, but if I look at those signs, my 8 is going to become negative. And I cannot divide 2 by 3, but because I have two negative signs, it becomes a positive 2x, and everything is over 3. And so that is my simplified expression, or my literal equation. All right, so let's look at this next problem. I need to solve for x. So I need it to be x equals. So I'm going to put a big box around my x so I know what I'm trying to do. So I need to get rid of all other terms before I can deal with the 7. So I need to flip the sign of my other term. What I do to one side, I do to the other. Those cancel out. I bring down my variable term. So 7x equals 14 plus y. Again, the 14 does not have a y, so I cannot combine those two numbers. I just have to put plus y. Now, I'm still need my x by itself, so now I need to get rid of the 7. A number next to a letter means that they are coefficients, which means I divide by coefficients to get rid of them. My 7's cancel. I'm left with x. And so now I can do a little bit of math. Will 14 divide by 7? Yes, it is 2. So I'm going to go ahead and do 14 divided by 7. But will y divide by 7? And that, again, I know my invisible number in front of y is 1, so that cannot happen. So I just need to put down plus y divided by 7. And that is how we simplify that half of our equation. All right, so now let's get into a few more complicated problems. So anytime I see a letter or a number next to a parentheses, I have to multiply. So I need to figure out how many terms I have. I have 2 terms. I know that because there's not a number in front of my L and there's not a number in front of my W, that invisible ones go there. So I'm going to multiply 2 times both of these terms. So A is going to equal 2L plus 2W. And my problem tells me here that I want to solve for W, so I need it to be W equals. And so I'm going to put a big box around my W so that I know what I need to try to isolate and get by itself. I need to get rid of all terms that are not W terms before I can deal with the coefficient in front of the W. I know that that 2 is a plus 2 because if there's no sign, I know it's positive. I need to flip the sign to get rid of a term. What I do to one side, I do to the other. My 2 L's cancel, and I need to bring my 2W to the bottom. Again, A and L are not the same variable, so there's nothing I can do. I just need to rewrite my A and rewrite my negative 2L. And so now I need to draw another box around my W so that I know what I need to do next. So a number next to a letter means it's a coefficient, which means I have to divide by my coefficients. And so to simplify this term, what I need to do is I need to put a divided by 2. I know that 2 divided by 2 is going to be a negative 1L. The 2's cancel, and so I'm left with W. And so that is how I simplify my term. All right. For this time, I need to solve for B, so I need it to be B equals. So I'm going to draw a big box around my B. Now here, this is all one term. There's not multiple terms. There's no plus or minus sign. So that means both of these numbers are coefficients. So if both of these numbers are coefficients, that means I need to divide by my coefficients. So I need to divide by 1/2, and I need to divide by h. What I do to one side, I do to the other. These cancel, and I'm left with a divided by 1/2 h equals b. Now, I still have one more step because I can't divide by 1/2. And so when I divide by a fraction, you could put this in the calculator, but I'm also going to talk you through it. So dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So if my fraction is 1/2, the reciprocal becomes 2/1. So I'm going to take a, which is a over 1, and I'm going to multiply it times 2/1. So what I end up getting is I end up getting 2a, and the over 1 disappears because anything over 1 is just simply itself. And so that's how the half goes away. So I end up with 2a divided by h equals b. And so that's how I go from there to here to there. All right, one last problem. So in this case, I need to solve for h, which means I need it to be h equals. I'm going to put a big box around my h. Now, this is one term because there is no plus or minus sign. So if it's one term, that means that both of these other two letters are coefficients. To get rid of coefficients, we divide by them. What I do to one side, I do to the other. And because they are all letters and I have no numbers, that is my final problem. V divided by LW equals H.